Do you guys know, Confucius once said, people say we're alike. They say we have got the same hair. It's you and me on the coin. The industry loves to spend. And when we put this to bed, the internet will go crazy. I'm glad I know how you feel, 'cause I ride for you, Charlie. I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands, and it's so confusing sometimes.
To be a girl, you're listening to Deep Cut.
All-timer opening. On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
Before we start talking about Edward Young's 1994 A Confucian Confusion, if you're enjoying the show, please remember to give us a rating or a review and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. And this will help others discover the show. You can also keep up with us at Deep Cut Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. And if you want to talk about this movie with us, or any other film, TV, music, that quote, please join us on our Discord server. And if you're a really big fan of the show, we've also recently launched a Patreon if you want to help support the show, or you can subscribe for free to check out exclusive posts. We've been doing monthly updates about what we've been watching and reading or whatever.
We've literally been posting.
Also, we have TikTok, so there's that, and we're at deepcutpod_film because someone took Deep Cut Pod already, unfortunately. Yeah, click the link in our description, or go to deepcutpod.com to find links to our Patreon, Discord, and all these other socials I've just mentioned here.
Well, welcome back to our Edward Yang series. We did a 3-episode series earlier this year with Yi, Taipei Story, and Terrorizers. You can check them out. They're episodes 83 to 85. We took a little break, and now we're back, and we've decided, as of today, or as of yesterday, we've decided to do the whole shebang. We're doing the whole filmography.
Thing.
So
We actually didn't realize that we'd decided that.
Yeah, we did. Without you, Eli. It was 2 against.
that's how out of it Eli's been this week.
I've really been very out of it.
We're so glad that you're here with us, Eli, and we're so glad.
I'm happy to be here. And what a great movie to be talking about.
I know.
He's
A Confusion.
I sure am.
An Eli confused. That's what this episode's gonna be.
That's me. I'm him.
But welcome to our discussion on Edward Yang's 1994 film, A Confucian Confusion, which was actually recently restored as part of this whole filmography-wide restoration work that's being done with Edward Yang. With the previous films in this series that we've talked about, Yi, Terrorizers, and Taipei Story, I think there were good quality versions of this film floating around on the internet pre-2022, but now we are getting them all in high quality delivered to us. So hopefully this will also bring a wave of new listeners who are catching A Confusion in good quality for the first time.
Something I did not do. I watched it in crisp 480p. There were points when people's outlines were just blurs.
Yeah, you can live in 2019 where this is
Try 2003.
It's okay.
You can pretend you're finding it like on your own.
Yeah, that's a true deep cut.
Yeah.
It's still not the lowest quality that I've watched a movie in for our pod, which would be Sisako's Life on Earth, which I think was truly just 120.
That was like 240p. Anyway.
I think that was like a rip of a VHS tape or something.
Came from someone's thumb drive, which then got imported into the cloud and then airdropped to my phone, which got carried over to someone's Apple Watch.
That's how we do it on Deep Cut. But to jump off of you, Eli, I want to hear first thoughts. This is the first time that you've seen this Yang film.
Yeah, so I am, though we joke about it, coming off of a very high pressure week. And it's really fun to unwind with this zany comedy where simultaneously, in classic Edward Yang fashion, people are having deep, sincere feelings and getting hurt, but also kind of new for me from Edward Yang would be the like wackiness. Actually, that's not true.
Yeah.
There's wackiness in Yi Yi for sure.
Sure.
Less so in A Brighter Summer Day. But I had fun watching, to borrow the language of your Letterboxd review, people ping-pong off of each other and trying to figure out what the friendcestuous family tree is here was a fun little exercise. It reminded me a lot of like college friend groups slash people in their 30s friend groups and all the like Wesleyan drama of who's angry at who's okay with who's having a makeup lunch here, who's sleeping with who.
He's not referencing anything real.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Just FYI.
I'm speaking more about Wesleyan as a vibe.
Yes.
I really am, truly. What about you guys?
This was my first time watching A Confucian Confusion.
Oh,
and
wait, this is both your first times watching. That's so exciting.
I watched this 2 weeks ago, whereas Eli watched it 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, they literally watched me finish it.
Yeah. I found it really fun. Like, I think this is like the start of Edward Yang going into doing comedy, more broadly speaking. And I think that injection of comedy, I think, really does a lot for me in terms of the way that it infuses Yang's work with a certain kind of more easy relatability. I just saw That Day on the Beach last night, which I did not like, which we'll talk about at some point.
We'll save it.
And we'll save it. But I think one of the filmmakers he's compared to a lot is Antonioni, which I've already mentioned on this podcast. And I don't like Antonioni. And I think the humor balances out his Antonioni influence in a way that,
Antonioniness.
yeah, which
Antonioniosity.
helps to balance what's going on with what he's trying to say. And I think it's clearly a commercial play. Like, he's going for a more commercial-minded filmmaking approach, starting from this film. And I think it's really working. And it doesn't mean that he's completely abandoned his preoccupations thematically. And I think he's still able to say what he wants to say, even though he's making something much more accessible. And I think this is maybe his most accessible work across the entire filmography. And I think this is the place to start if you are completely new to Edward Yang. Like, even more so than EE because of EE's length. I think EE is accessible, but I think the length is scary. But this one, because it's short or shorter, it feels easier to get into. And it's also broadly more of a comedy than EE is.
Yeah.
So I think this maybe is the best place to start for Yang. Yeah. For somebody who's just completely it's completely alien to them, this is the place to start.
Yeah. And I think, like, I agree with you, Ben. This was my third time seeing the film. So I think what I'm realizing with rewatching this film, I think it was just like 2 times in the course of like 1 year. So what I'm realizing is how dense this work is, like dense in a way that A Brighter Summer Day is dense, or Yi is dense, with all these characters and all these interlocking connections between these characters and understanding that. So it is a comedy, and it has that sort of broad appeal of enjoying these conversations between folks. But I also think that it requires, or doesn't really require, but it benefits from a closer look or a relook. But I really love this film. This film has grown on me, like, from rewatching it. I think it is expertly done. I think it's a sleeper. It's a true deep cut film. Not many people know it. Yang is still operating at his highest level, but it is a little bit of a swerve. It's not what Yang is known for at all.
Yeah.
I was reminded a lot when watching it. Actually, one of the films I remember catching with Eli at his old place was Whit Stillman's Metropolitan, where these young folks go around and have these entanglements with each other and with other people, and you get to see the world that they live in. And that is set in like sort of a social world, but Yang's Confusion is very much set within a business world with these personal relations. But I also felt a lot of links with that, with a lot of like the walk and talk or the sit and talks. It was just, yeah, it's lovely. And I think he just does it better than Stillman. I'm sorry.
To me, the touchstone is more Altman than Stillman. I think of like a Nashville, like any of those big ensemble cast films from Altman. Like less of, I guess it's kind of web of life, but not just within a family. This one's like broader. You have a professional network.
Yes.
That's also infused with these francestrous relationships, as Eli's coined it. And so that feeling of it being about a group of people rather than there being any main character per se. Because I was thinking right before we were recording, like, is there a main character? But I don't really think there is. Like, there's a pretty well balanced perspective of all of them and how they all interact. And really, the character is the relationships. Like, how do all these people fit together?
Yeah.
And Altman's a great touch point for this. And I think one of the people who kind of, not say pioneered, but like really did this in a really big way, where going through an entire big web of life. Yeah. He's one of the first web of life guys, really.
Shortcuts comes to mind.
Definitely. Yeah.
I find myself also thinking a bit of Boyfriends and Girlfriends by
Romare.
Yeah.
And I don't find myself thinking of Kiyoshi Kurosawa, but there is a point when a character is speaking to the novelist and she says, your novels are about crime and death, and you say that they're the cure. And I was like, oh. That's Cure.
The Cure. We're seeing Kurosawa everywhere. Before we go into this movie, let's do a brief summary. Well, I do know this movie, but I am going to borrow from Jadis Films, who wrote this very great description of the movie that sort of lays out our characters and these relationships.
Is it pronounced Janus?
Huge anus. Huge
no,
anus.
I think it's Janus.
No, I'm gonna keep it. No. I refuse to call it by the name that it's intended to be. So from Jadis Films. Art versus commerce. Friendship versus status. Independence versus conformity. Values clash and collide. You, Jadis. Values clash and collide in Edward Yang's study of an increasingly westernized country heading into the 21st century without moral guideposts. Moving from breakout hit A Brighter Summer Day's investigation of the past to a critical survey of the present, A Confucian Confusion charts the tangled web of emotional and professional manipulations among a group of young urbanites. At its center is Molly, director of a floundering public relations firm, alienated by the childish fiancé who bankrolls her enterprise and frustrated by the demands of an assistant, Qi, and her own fiancé, Xiaoming, Molly lashes out at everyone in her path and threatens to dismantle the company altogether. Meanwhile, Molly's talk show host sister attempts to dissuade her separated husband from continuing to write a dark novel about the return of Confucius to a jaded modern society. Injecting comedic elements into his patented brand of earnest soul-searching, Yang finds humor as well as pathos in the desperate behavior of a lost and lonely generation.
That just about cuts it.
That was also confusing to listen to because I was like, her fiance, which her?
It doesn't even mention Larry and Feng.
Oh yeah, Larry's great.
Can you explain who Larry is?
Or Birdie. Larry is... Okay, so first in order to do that, the childish fiance is Akeem, who's a goof and a doof and very funny. And has very wide ties, which I like.
Yes.
And I want to adopt that style. His accountant is Larry, who claims to be helping him set up a marriage with Molly, but is secretly lusting after Molly and is also lusting after kind of every woman he comes into contact with.
Yeah.
But it turns out he's dating Feng, who is an assistant at Molly's company, who Molly fires on a whim, and then Feng auditions for Birdie's play. And Birdie is another character who's directing a play.
And is friends with Molly.
Yeah, and Birdie is being accused. Well, Larry's throwing Birdie under the bus by saying to Akeem that Molly is having an affair with Birdie. Because
Also,
Akeem
Larry's married to
Yes.
a person we don't see.
Larry's married?
has a daughter
married.
who...
Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on in this film.
A lot going on.
I was thinking, are there more characters than there are in EE? And there kind of are.
I think so.
And in a shorter amount of time, which is insane. Like, that's why it feels so dense, because there's just so many bloody characters. Early on in the film, I was like, which one's Molly? I got really confused with the names. I was very confused.
And I love the way that they
Try
say...
watching it in 480p.
I love the way that they say Molly. Molly. Molly.
And I think the only context I want to throw in there is actually the Chinese title of the film, which I was just looking up today, because I think Young's Chinese titles are really interesting because they're never exactly what the English titles are, which are the ones that we know the best.
Except for EE.
Except EE, which is like literally the same thing. Although EE is also like translated as a 1 and a 2, right? Which is kind of what the meaning of that is. Anyway, so this one, the English title is A Confucian Confusion, which is like a fun rhyme pun kind of thing going on here. The Chinese title is 独立时代, which directly translates to independent generation or independent era, which is thematically completely diametrically opposed to what Confucian values are. Right?
Yes.
So reading the different titles in different languages tells you what the film has on its mind. It is talking about this new era of independence that is opposed to the traditional Chinese values of Confucianism, where the community and society is so-called put above yourself. Like, you work within a society, you work within a community, you do things for other people. Whereas now it's like these young people, they're only thinking about themselves, which is everyone here
Yes.
that we just talked about. Yeah.
Very much so in Young's wheelhouse of the shift between generations and the code of values changing across time.
Yeah. Yang even
Right.
says this in an interview, right? In that documentary that Koreeda makes about him and Ho Xiaoshen. It's sort of goes behind the scenes when Yang is creating and shooting A Confucian Confusion. And he talks about how independence is self-directed and self-reliant, and it basically goes against Confucian society, or it just doesn't exist in Confucian society. And it's a problem that Chinese societies need to face in these coming years.
Still facing it now.
Yeah, that's true.
Where do you guys want to begin with this film?
I want to start with a question. As I was watching, I was thinking about how in his other movies, I would pretty definitively say that Yang has affection for all the characters in the movie. Thinking of Terrorizers, thinking of Taipei Story, certainly Yi Yi, certainly, pretty much A Brighter Summer's Day. Does he have fondness for all the characters here? Because I don't know if he does.
That's a good question, because I feel like the more I've watched Yang films, the more I feel like he's not a person that likes his characters that much. I don't think he's presenting likable people, except for maybe EE.
Yeah.
Like, I think only EE is the one which is like, oh, this is like a nice family. But like before EE, it's like all of these people are like almost like kind of the butt of the joke, which is the movie is the joke. And like these people just don't get it. Like, because his films are so critical about society. So the characters are a representation of society. So he's critiquing how they think and what they do. Yeah, although I do think he has affection for them because they're kind of funny.
Or he has empathy for them.
I think he does. Yeah.
He lets you see why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
With these characters, there's some who are just like outright really selfish.
I still feel there's affection because they're played for laughs, and it's like,
Yeah.
I can't really explain it because there's this good vibe going on in this.
Yeah, and I think they're like also with the way the ending plays out, I think there is just a small section of goodwill that Yang has towards these characters. I think if you put this in comparison with the other endings that we were discussing in previous episodes where there is a burst of violence that happens that sort of goes maybe not unjustified, but it goes without explanation. I think with this film ending on like a very light note, I think it shows that he feels empathy towards these characters. And I think I remember us talking about Terrorizers and us also being like, does he not like these characters as well because of the way that they're presented? So I think Yang does have a very interesting and complicated relationship between him and the characters that he writes. Should we start by talking about a few characters? I know this is a big web of life film, but I think we have some central figures that we can talk about. Like, I think the center of this film could be Molly, who owns the PR firm, and her assistant and college friend, Titi, and the way that they both approach their lives in a business fashion, but also in a social way, show the different ways that they navigate society. And they're commented on by everyone else, and they're commenting on themselves the entire time. And I think those are both like our central characters that we can dig into. So why don't we start off with Molly? What do you guys think about Molly?
Actually, I find it hard to talk about them in isolation. And I think it's kind of a good idea to talk about them in pairs because the film is always comparing and contrasting different people because they're people from different classes.
True.
Right? Social and financial. So Molly and Cici are this kind of two sides of the same coin where they're young professionals, but Molly comes from privilege, so she like brings Cici up with her, right? But in that sense, Cici is working for her and is deferent to her, even though they are friends on the same tier. They're like peers, but because of the professional working relationship, Molly has power over her, which completely complicates the way that their friendship operates. Right? There are scenes where Cici is being her friend, but she's like, I have to listen to my boss and go see her at night.
Yeah.
And she's like, doesn't want to do it. You know, she doesn't want to do that, but she's doing it as part of her job, really, to essentially manage Molly's emotions as her secretary. So I find this to be quite interesting because the film is a lot about the jealousy of Molly and of Cici because she thinks that Cici is like using her cute dimples to like get with guys, and she's like very jealous about that. Yeah. So it is interesting how these two interact, but they're also kind of friends. I don't even know if they're friends, but at some points I question it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's that scene where Chi comes home late at night and gets a call to leave again to be with Molly, and she's, I guess, frustrated, and this is something that her family has seen before based on the way that they react to her leaving and saying that she's going to Molly's again. But then with the anticipation that this can be, I guess, tiring for Chi, you get this very sentimental scene by the pool where they both talk about their feelings and their frustrations, and Chi is actually being a really good friend to Molly by being there and seems to enjoy their time together. But the more that you think about it, the more it's like, yes, she's getting paid to do this as well.
Yes.
And she is, that dynamic is super complex. And when you bring in other characters like Xiao Ming, who is pushing Qi to leave the job and going on his own way to make sure that happens, it throws a spanner in this friendship that they really need to figure out. I really like this characterization of TT because in the beginning, they're already playing with her, I guess, demure kind of look, or the way that she presents herself. I think earlier on, there's like a few words used to like describe TT to her face, that she's innocent, that she's lovely, and she's tender. And it's described by two men to her.
Yeah.
Like
back to back.
But one first using it as like a way to critique her and like saying that this is all like a put on, it's a show. And then next, Larry comes into the office and says how lovely it is that she's so innocent and lovely and tender. And immediately you can see in her face that she's like, well, yes. That's a really, really funny moment.
But also, like, which perception of herself does she choose to believe more? I think she's having trouble deciding.
Yes.
TC's journey is about this conflict that she has between what she thinks people perceive her as and who she really thinks she is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to pick one main character, I would actually pick TC because she interacts, I think, with the most people.
She does.
And she has a very clear arc, which is that she is dealing with how people see her, and then she doesn't know who she is. And then when she starts having conversations with the novelist character that has been difficult with the company, that's where like a lot of that thematic stuff starts coming out, where she's like, stop saying I'm a certain way, like I'm actually this way. And then it's really telling the way that she is with Xiaoming, which is her fiance, where they are so combative, where with everyone else she's really demure and like sweet and really like bites her tongue. But with Xiaoming, she just lets everything out and they're really, really mean to each other. Xiaoming too is a very kind of passive and soft person.
Right.
But with TT, he becomes kind of a dick.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's a really interesting way. And that's very common for couples, I think, where like on the outside, they're like a perfect couple. And people talk about how they seem like the perfect couple actually in this film.
Right.
Right. But when we watch them argue in those cabs, they're always just at each other's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that to be quite interesting.
I was just thinking about how Tsitsi does not really have her own shots solo. She often is in two shots with other people. I am wondering now if that's the same thing for Xiaoming. Is that the case? Both of them are very much so shaped by the people around them.
Yeah. But I think you could say that about most of the characters in this film, because a lot of the interactions in this film are just between two people. So you have a lot of scenes where you have two characters who've never met before in the film, like meet and have a conversation, and then they depart, and then you have another two characters that you've never seen together. So it's just Yang has this cast of characters, and they're all interconnected in their ways. And through the film, he pairs people up over and over again, where every time he pairs two characters together, you get to see another side of each of them, basically. I think that's what's so great about this, is that it is an ensemble piece, but there are rarely scenes where more than two characters interact. So he's building an ensemble through pairing these characters together. That's what I think is so brilliant about it. I think it's just it's one of those magic tricks. It's one of those classic Edward Yang magic tricks that he's able to pull it off as a complete full picture by the end of the film.
Maybe to go on a little bit of a tangent, because you're talking about this way of pairing, because I find the narrative structure of this to be quite expertly done because of the juggling of so many characters. And in my Letterboxd review, I talked about how it feels like a Shakespearean or Wildean comedy of manners, right? Like a Shakespearean comedy. You know, the character that made me think this is actually Larry, who I think of as like the clown of the story, but who is in everything. Like he has his finger in every single pie. So he keeps popping up in unexpected ways. And you're like, how come he knows this guy? How come he is involved with this? And like, what is his relationship? And everything he says is not what he means. He never means what he says.
Right.
And so he's a very interesting kind of jester character that keeps popping up, that links everything together. you know, and he has some of his own arcs, but he thinks he doesn't until it finally bites him in the ass, right? And so he kind of operates as what I would call the core thematic character representation, because he's an accountant and he has this incredible monologue at the start, near the beginning of the film, where he talks about how he looks at a company's balance sheet the way he thinks of relationships.
Yes. Okay, wait, say the line. There's a line in that that's so good.
What's the line?
When I was reading your financial statement, I was very moved.
Yeah, and I was like, this is like what is on Yang's mind. Like, on top of the whole independence versus Confucianism thing, this film is a lot about love and money and the relationship between the two of them, you know? And as I've noticed in his subsequent films, a lot of his films are about capitalism. And about work, which is like really interesting. Yeah.
You could even say that about Taipei's story as well. It's very much about their financial or economic presence in society.
Yep.
For sure. I like that we were talking about Molly and Titi as a friendship that gets troubled by how money distorts their interactions, right? Molly coming from privilege, hiring and employing Titi, being able to blur the line between friendship interactions and work interactions. I like that they end on a note of hope for their friendship. That sort of recalls the moment at the pool when they sort of are at odds with each other and Molly actually snaps at Titi and yells at her, and then they light each other's cigarettes wordlessly and just start laughing with each other. That's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Ben, to jump off of or to add on to your point, I think there's a lot of talk in this film about this term called 感情工作, which means emotional labor or emotional work, where they a lot of people accuse TT of doing a lot of this to, I don't know, to make people comfortable and then you can close a deal or something. And that is, like, I think that ties directly to what you were talking about, Ben, with love and capitalism.
Like, I think the thing about this like term 感情 is that it makes me think of not just like emotions, but also about relationships. Like it's like the feeling between me and you. Like, that's what I think of when I think of the word 感情.
Right.
So it's not even just about emotional labor, it's about the labor of creating relationships.
Right.
And so they accuse her of essentially, I would say, buddying up with people to help herself.
Right.
You know, that she is essentially creating connections. It's like this work of creating connections by being this sweet person.
Right.
You know?
But don't you think that feels quite Confucian-esque? I'm not, like, I guess I'm not an expert in Confucianism at all, but I think the basis isn't the basis of it like interpersonal relations, right? Like, it's like how you relate to other people within a society, and it's sort of the collectivist in that kind of sense. That way of approaching business being a very westernized kind of business setting, is sort of that Confucianism pushing forward.
Yep.
Everyone accuses Titi of taking on that kind of self-serving, opportunistic, fake kindness, when really she is trying to figure herself out and be a good friend. The author thinks that he's Confucius when really he just doesn't really have a huge handle on much. And meanwhile, Larry, in that big opening monologue, espouses exactly this value. He refers to friendships as long-term investments. He's the one who actually is like trying to leverage the people around him, but no one until the very end realizes that he is doing this and taking advantage of people.
Of course you love that, Ben. Man.
I love that, as in, like, I love that he says that. I don't say it's a
Larry.
good thing. I don't think it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I love this idea that he has, which is insane, but also true.
I knew it, man.
Anyway, we bring value to his life.
Yeah, it's about the value of people.
It's true.
I think what you're saying, like you're thinking that isn't what everyone here is doing also Confucian? Like, because everyone is trying to get ahead through relationships.
Mm-hmm. Or they're doing different, varying degrees of commitment to that level of independence.
Right.
But I think the commentary here is that, of course, in an Asian society, when you do business, you need to cultivate relationships. And that is Confucian. But because of the pursuit of money and capital, that relationship is corrupted by the pursuit of money. So yes, I'm cultivating a relationship, but it's actually not for you, it's for me. I don't think about you at all. I'm only doing this emotional relationship labor in so much as it will benefit me. And I think that is the thing that's happening a lot in this. And so when they question what TC is doing, they're questioning whether she's genuine in how she relates to other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets to her. She's like, I am being genuine, and everyone thinks that I'm just
Looking for money.
Yeah, I'm just like trying to get ahead by like sleeping my way to the top or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that to her is very offensive, which it is. So I think baked into all of these relationships is this feeling that everyone is trying to get theirs. You think about the relationship, we can jump into another one, which is Molly and her fiance, Akeem, which is completely essentially an arranged relationship between two companies.
Yep.
Like it's almost a kind of old school traditional Chinese era dynastic kind of story, you know, except we have companies rather than families, which I kind of want to talk about a little bit later. And so the way that they kind of forget that they have feelings, because they're like, I would marry you for money. You know, they're so okay with it until they realize they're not, because they realize they have other people that they're interested in. Yep. For Akeem, like, he has probably never had an emotional relationship or romantic relationship in his life. He's a child, right?
Yeah.
And then he starts falling in love with like the most random people.
Yep.
And then he's like, I want to do that, which is fine. I mean, but then it makes him realize that he cares about something aside from money, you know?
Yeah.
And we joked a little bit about how near the end, he's like, maybe I should be an artist, you know? But at least, you know, even though it's kind of a lark, he at least has something that's not just about money.
No,
you know,
there's
that he cares
something
about
that's driving him. Yeah.
You know? And then for Molly is this realization that she is maybe in love with Xiaoming, which I don't know whether you guys caught on to this as you were watching this the first time. Like, was this expected that she and Xiaoming would get together a little bit?
I don't remember the first time, because the thing is, you don't see them together until they have that really awkward lunch together. And that awkward...
I did think at the lunch that maybe they would get together.
Yeah. But at that lunch, they're all, like, I guess everyone's talking about TT. Like, it's all about TT. Yeah. But I think in that way that Xiaoming goes behind TT's back to talk to Molly about it, I was like, there is something there between these two people. But I want to go back to this Molly and Akeem arranged marriage thing. I love at the start of this film, Akeem, our first like basically big scene with Akeem where he's talking to Larry and he's like, we're so good. We have no sex. We don't have a relationship. We like sleep in different places. It's like China, like equal. Yeah, like it's one country, two systems.
It's like China and Taiwan.
Yeah, and he like does this, and then Larry's like, "Stop being a dumbass." I thought that was
stop using the idioms I teach you to say stupid things.
Yeah. And that's it's like a genius comedic beat, and it is also like placed in this very long take where they're moving around the room. It's just another example of the expertise that Yang employs.
And he's putting on a big tie.
Yeah, he is.
Oh,
big
man
tie
has
cinema.
I do wonder about that kind of reference to China and Taiwan. Like, it's like at first I was like, oh, is this what this film's about? But it really kind of isn't. It's kind of this random thing he inserts in there just to like poke the bear a little bit, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. So kind of a tangent again. I was thinking about the intertitles in this film. What do you guys think about that? Because what I think about that is that it gives it a feeling like we're watching something historical when it's not.
Historical, say more.
Like, there's this feeling like, oh, the next scene is about something you already know. Like, this is the story of two dynasties and how what happened. And this is like a quote from this scene that you should know. But I don't know. This is like random new people, right? These are just random young people. So it makes it feel like it's a classic story, even though it's not. You know, you can imagine these intertitles in a very like traditional story. But in this, it's so strange. Like, it just feels off.
Yeah.
But I think he's trying to present it as this dynastic story in contemporary times where you have families, which are businesses, and then also kind of this Shakespearean like family dynamic kind of thing. You have characters all trying to get theirs, and it's a generation. So if you come from like the Chinese side, it's about a generation of people. So it feels like a historical document almost. But it's a very fascinating choice, which he has not repeated in any of his other films.
Yeah.
You know what it makes me think of?
What?
What?
Hong Sang-soo.
Oh. It's true. It's true. I feel like a lot of the stuff in the intertitles like call forward to a line or a subject that is being spoken about in the next scene. And I think Hong likes to preempt scenes like that sometimes.
Another famous film that does this, that does not predate this film, is In the Mood for Love. A little bit at the start, when you think about that. Like, it's about quoting stuff from the later as well.
Yeah, and 2046 also does it.
2046 too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this feeling like they draw from a text when they don't. You know?
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That's what I think those intertitles do, which is interesting.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Should I know this line? Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Then you realize what it is. It's actually just a line from later.
Yeah.
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 When that line comes up later that you have read a few minutes ago, or even just a few seconds ago, what is that feeling for you, Ben? Like when you finally hear it?
I think it really varies depending on the scene. Because the first time you watch this film, you have no context about this line. You don't know what they're talking about, you know? And then when the line comes up, you're like, oh, this is what they were talking about. Like, sometimes it's just like, oh, it's like so whatever. And sometimes like, oh, this is the key to the scene. Like, this is the most important part of the scene. Like, this is where maybe the relationship breaks. Or like, this is the accusation, you know? So it is a fascinating choice, which I feel like someone can write an essay on, because it is something you can kind of forget about, but it's there in the entire freaking movie.
I wonder what they say all strung together.
Probably nothing.
I don't think it'll make
crazy.
sense. Maybe.
Probably wouldn't make sense.
You can do the digging, Eli.
Wait, there's a code. There's a code. He's dropping hints for us.
He's just trying to confuse us. That's the movie.
Edward Yang was a member of the Illuminati.
Oh, wow. You heard it here first.
Anyway, what were we talking about?
The Illuminati.
I sort of want to touch on, like, in preparation for this episode, Ben and I watched the documentary that Koreeda made. It's sort of a made-for-TV documentary where Koreeda went to Taiwan and filmed Ho Xiaoxian and Edward Yang in this period of their careers. So Ho was just put out The Puppet Master and was presenting that, and Yang was filming this film. And after talking about having a very close-knit relationship earlier on in their career, Koreeda is presenting two filmmakers that feel like they're going in their own separate directions in this film. And there's a lot of interesting like moments of seeing Yang direct A Confucian Confusion that was, I think, very telling. So they like in one example is they shot a scene and they cut, and I think it was the first take, and Edward Yang goes, "Oh ho ho ho, 第一点, which means my first point. And he and it cut, and the camera pans to the crew people, and they're like, "Well, definitely take number 2." And I like love watching him direct his actors. There's a scene where there's like a shot where he's directing the actress that plays Molly, and he's trying to convey to her the sort of pacing and the emotion behind her line delivery. And I forgot exactly what words he used to describe it, but I think I just really like the relationship shown between him and his actors and the way that he plays with his actors on set. Ben, do you want to speak about watching this?
It's a good piece of direction because he's just saying, don't be so loud. You're just trying to get her to be more anxious. Right? She's just like, you're trying to rush her. Just rush her. And then like you're not shouting at her. You're not that loud. You're just rushing her. Yeah. And I think what is interesting, and I think I don't want to get too much in talking about Ho in this episode, but this comparison is so interesting because this is the moment, and I talked about this before, this is the moment that Yang's like, okay, you know what? Let's be more commercially minded. And he talks about it in this film. And you can see that he's trying to make something that will appeal to more people. But also what's interesting is like Yang startly like starts having this rock star persona that I never expected from him.
I think he's had that.
I didn't know this is the guy.
That.
Yeah, I didn't know this was him. But like compared to Ho's just some guy that likes old Chinese shit. You know, like Ho's just like I want to preserve old traditional Chinese stuff before they're lost, which is also very commendable.
Yes.
Whereas Yang is so like, I want to talk about today. You know, I want to talk about now. You know. And I want to do stuff about young people.
Yeah.
And that is just so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so different in their approach. Yeah. I don't want to talk about Ho too much, but there's a fucking great moment. I'm so sorry. He's like playing he's in the booth and he's listening to a score. And as he's listening to the score, he starts improv singing over the score. Ho Xiaoshan improv singing over the score, detailing what happens in this commercial that he's making. It is brilliant. So it's in, I think it's part of like a box set of something. It's like a special edition. But if you can't find it, hop on Discord, message me. I'll see to you that you will have this Koreeda documentary in your hands.
I think it's also on YouTube. I feel like
it's
on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it is on YouTube. Don't hop on Discord.
Anyway, so I think what's really interesting...
Well, do hop on Discord, but...
I think what's really interesting is that, and this has got nothing to do with any of the films, but we talk about capitalism and work for a lot of Yang's films, right? And then with his career, he's also becoming himself commercially minded because he also needs to put food on the table, right? And he also wants people to watch his films. Ho has less of that impulse, but you see what's happening in the documentary is that he's working on a commercial during the documentary because he needs to put food on the table. I have never imagined Ho Xiaoxian as a commercial filmmaker, as in like making commercials. Like I've never imagined it. And seeing this documentary and being like, oh, Ho also did commercials to make money was so interesting. I was like, even he had to do essentially what is something I don't like, which is to like take his art form and just like use it to aid another company to make money. And so even though with the films themselves, Ho is not being commercially minded, he still takes his craft into a commercial space. Right? So even though they are in different directions, they're also doing the same thing. They're both trying to make that bread. Like you gotta make that bread or you can't survive. So I think capitalism is so much on Yang's mind in all of his films. Just constantly. Yeah.
Yeah, and he doesn't totally demonize it either. It's a very nuanced investigation of it.
Like we still have so many characters to talk about that we have not talked about.
Who do you want to talk about, Ben?
Okay, I already talked about accountant. Best character. Ridiculous.
Larry?
Larry is interesting because his counterpart is Feng.
Yeah.
Who is kind of the female equivalent of him. She wanders across all the men. And whereas Larry is using money to seduce women, his idea of money and like the way he equates to relationships, and he wants to use that to seduce women, Feng is seducing men because she's supposedly trying to get ahead in whatever her career is, which I think is being an actress. So it is very gender, and I do have like reservations about how Yang presents gender in his films. And I don't think it's like necessarily problematic, but I think it is interesting how he pits them against each other. What do you guys think?
I really like Feng. I think she definitely does get the short end of the stick in terms of all the female characters in this and the way that she's presented. But I think in the scenes that we see her in, especially in that, there's a long take in the bedroom between Larry and Feng as they're getting ready for bed. And I think she reveals to him that Birdie is the one that is seeing, or like the rumor is Birdie and Molly are together. But I think in that scene and the way that you see how Feng can have this power over men, even earlier when she sort of courts Xiaoming on the way home and she does a little cartwheel, I think there's just a presence to her that is undeniable. But that still being said, she is very much, I guess, using her body and her, I guess, presence as a ways to get ahead in society. And I think that you can't deny that that's what Yang is trying to communicate with Feng's character.
I think even though it's very gender, it also goes back to this equation between love and money. Right? Like, yes, it's seduction, but in the end, a transaction of money and a transaction of sex or love is also the same thing. In a way, in this film, you can buy love, you know?
Yeah.
And love can buy you money. Like, they are the same thing, you know?
I think Yang's arguing the opposite here. Because those moneyed interactions, when they become conflated with love and sex, tend to fail. Yeah. And the ones that flourish are the ones that can disavow themselves of transaction.
I think it's when you crisscross these two parallel lines is when things get complicated.
Yeah.
When you buy money with money, it's simple. But when you buy money with love, then you realize maybe you don't want money, you actually want love.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you try and buy love with money, you realize actually you want money. Right? And so I find that like very fascinating. And I think, as you said, Wilson, this is like his densest script. I think thematically very interesting because it's not definitive about what it's actually trying to say.
Yeah.
But everything is actually just within the relationships. Like the relationships are the film. And it's not like the theme comes first. It's like the relationships are the theme.
Yeah.
So in a way, you can talk about this film endlessly because it's got so many different angles at this core thing where it's trying to talk about business and love at the same time. Yeah.
It's really cool because if you think about this in the context of his filmography, this comes right after A Brighter Summer's Day. So so you basically have a man who has exercised that. Like he's done the many characters about a lot of different themes about an era, right? He's done that in a massive kind of way about like violence and about national history. But when he's doing you could argue that with A Confucian Confusion, he's doing a similar thing here, but the setting and the themes that he wants to attack are different. But he is making a commentary about a group of people at a certain time in Taiwan. And it's just because that this is set in the 90s that it comes across as a comedy and he's making it about business. But I think the intention can be seen as similar, and the scope of it can also be seen as similar.
I agree with you. And I think it is crazy he made a film about professional work. Like, this is a film about work. Like, like that shouldn't be interesting.
No.
You know? Like, usually when they do screenwriting, it's like, oh, there's the A plot and the B plot is like the work. But this one, the A plot is the work and the relationships. Like, they're both A plots. Like, how Larry, like, schemes to, like, have this business takeover is part of this A plot. Like, it is the reason that Akeem and Molly have a relationship.
Yeah.
right? That is all there, but then it's complicated by all the personal stuff and people trying to get a hit. Xiaoming trying to get a hit, somewhat unintentionally. Qiqi trying to get a hit. Molly trying to get a hit. Akim trying to get a hit. Who else is left? Everyone's just trying to get a hit in their careers, and that is the film, you know. And also, they want to fuck each other. Like that is like so difficult to juggle, right?
Yeah.
That I don't know how he wrote this. Like it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's a great script.
I want to talk about what you guys think about Xiaoming and Qiqi leaving off like that. I think
at the end.
Yeah, at the end, where you have that elevator scene where they decide to break up, and then Xiaoming comes back into the elevator door closes, and then he thinks for a second, and he's like, no, I want to be back in this relationship now. And he opens the elevator door, and Qiqi's standing outside, presumably with the same exact thought, and they reunite. I think on paper, right, it's a classic, like, I guess, rom-com-y reuniting at the end. But I think with the baggage that both of these characters have, it's very... I wouldn't say that I would, like, just take it for face value. I wonder what you guys think about it.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think they should be back together, of course. But I will say that after a movie of thinking, Yang's not doing much of his classic frame activation. This last shot has great frame activation.
Whoa!
Damn, when that lift opens, so good.
It's really
So
fucking good.
I will say that I don't read that the same way. Because to give more context, like at the end of the film, they basically have a very, very mutual breakup because they realize that they're not good for each other, which is great. Like it's a really nice moment when they both realize that actually they both want other things.
Yeah.
And that the relationship is not good for them. So they have this breakup, and then at the end, like just because they see each other and then what, they hug? Do they hug?
Yeah, they hug.
They hug.
Right? They hug, right? But they don't like kiss. So that's important. That's an important distinction in a romantic film.
No,
by
you're
the
right.
way.
You're right. Yeah.
You know?
That is true.
So for me, I actually don't feel like it's this moment where they are choosing or even want to be together. I think it's kind of a gesture of goodwill almost, more than anything. Because I really didn't believe for a second that this was what it meant, that they wanted to be with each other, you know? But I think it's like, you can't break up with somebody so mutually and nicely without realizing the amount of life you've had with them already.
That's true.
So I think even though it was like mutual, it was like too professional. And then it was like, this hug acknowledges the relationship that they have with each other. And so it has this really nice feeling of conclusiveness, which I think is really good, but also doesn't deny the fact that they have both grown and already decided different things for themselves. Yeah, but it's a great emotional beat.
I like that also because the thing that partially drove the dissolution of their relationship was how focused on the future and parentheses financial future of the relationship that Xiaoming had. He was pushing Titi to quit the job because it was not financially stable.
Yeah.
And he wound up intervening in his partner's relationship with Molly in the name of that financial future. It was the source of a lot of their arguments. So to counter that dissolving force with a hug in the end that does feel like it has goodwill, I totally agree, Ben, does feel like a nice thematically relevant last note.
Yeah. I really like the way that you put it, Ben.
Thank you. It's really interesting that we're going to talk about mahjong later. It's really interesting.
Good pairing, right? Good pairing.
Yeah, these are really, I would say, paired films in his filmography in terms of what's on their mind. Yeah. And the way that they're shaped as well, like the shape of these films are very similar.
Yeah.
Even if the content is like crazily different.
Yes. Yes. I think probably just in Yang's career, this, I think, comes at a point of transition for him. Because I think as much as you can relate A Brighter Summer Day to Yi, there's a lot of growth that can happen and did happen in between those two, and the growth being A Confucian Confusion and Mahjong is quite telling, I think, to see where he ends up in Yi, or moves on to in Yi.
It is a very packed movie. It is a very, very packed movie.
Yeah.
I wonder after rewatching it if it's going to take my top favorite Yang.
I think it still is probably I don't know. It's a toss-up between that and Yi. But I also I think like I acknowledge, like I appreciate A Confucian Confusion so much, like in what it does or what it's trying to do, that I'm like, oh, it's so hard not to give you 5 stars, because it's like so, like you're just doing it so well. And everyone's acting so well, and it's so funny. Yeah.
It is really funny. There was one joke that I called before it happened, which was when Molly and Larry's driving around, and Larry's like, boy, I sure am hitting on you, huh? Like, just like being so obvious about it. And then they pull up to a gas station, and Molly's like, boy, we drove around and got dinner, and we ran out of gas. Go fill up the tank. And I was like, she is going to leave him behind, absolutely. And then he gets out of the car to go to the gas tank and fill the car, and she tosses his bag out and drives away. And we're like, yeah.
The physicality in which she throws his bag, I always remember it.
Just like a underhanded toss. Go get your bag.
Also, Ben, you got to add this to your big face list, because there's of Birdie in his studio.
Oh, yeah, I did add it.
There
Yes,
are portraits of him.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Awesome.
Yeah, I remember now. Yeah. It is funny how the accountant is the supposed Casanova in this. I was very confused. Like, what is happening? Why the accountant? And then the civil servant, Liren, also. I was like, really? These guys?
It's really funny that whenever the accountant Larry needs to lie about something, he cannot pull it off.
Yeah.
He cannot get through the sentence. Except when he's lying to men.
Are there thematic stuff that we're not on? I feel like there might be, but I can't remember. Or should we talk about cinematography a bit? Because we haven't really.
I feel like there's little to talk about, but I think there's really something to the long take 2 shot here that gets employed so many times here. And just the framing of that, and seeing 2 characters exist within the same frame and how they physically interact with each other. What I'm thinking about most is that scene between Molly and Xiaoming when they first see each other, when they're waiting for a table at the restaurant, and they're standing a little awkwardly next to each other, and you get a sense of the tensions that have brought both characters to this point with each other. The things that they've said to Titi outside of each other is sort of like coming to a head here, and it sort of comes to a head in this really awkward waiting in a line long take 2 shot.
Yeah, it's rough.
It's rough.
I think the long take 2 shots give this a much more theatrical quality, because it's like, here's a scene. Let's do the whole scene, and we're going to end the scene.
Yeah.
Right. And essentially, he's shooting the whole film like this. Right. It's like, here's a scene. I have like a medium long shot. Just going to move it around as they move around space. Do like blocking, which Yang is always really good at.
Yes.
But also just basically allowing the characters to be themselves, be characters within that scene, and allowing the actors to control the pacing of the scene. And I think that carries through from Confucian through to EE. Like, this is the way that he has decided is his style. Like, this is the style. And like, there are moments where he will try to inject it with like different like fun bits, and usually those bits are those activating the frame bits.
Yeah.
I think I love the TGI Fridays set because of that window. It's great.
Yeah.
Like, the world is outside, and then he uses it when Xiaoming and Liren come and interact with Feng, and I think Titi in the restaurant, right? And so even though, yes, it's the background, but the background's also real, and like the characters we know are also in that background.
Mm-hmm.
So there are quite a few repeated spaces in the film, and you're able to kind of like see them in different configurations. Yeah. So I think this style, even though it's like not flashy or anything, it really works for the material, which is mostly about dialogue and mostly about characters and mostly about acting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he doesn't really need to do too much cinematographically to really make this work, and really just let it be this, I guess, acting forward piece more than anything.
Yeah. You're really right, Ben. This feels very Shakespearean.
Agreed.
Of Yang. Yeah. This whole film.
Agreed. If there is camera movement, it's often coming from being on sticks and panning around as characters walk through the room that they're interacting in, which does not, I believe, happen in Yi Yi.
I think there are. No, there are definitely pans in EE. There are definitely pans in EE.
But I think there's a lot more cutting in Taipei's story and Terrorizers that you see a big shift that when he makes A Brighter Summer's Day, where you have a lot of scenes where Yang puts a lot of trust in the actors to dictate the pacing of the scene, basically. But that's one of the big like wins or like pluses of doing long takes, is that the actors naturally can dictate how long this scene goes for, or how short it goes for.
I mean, I kind of remember for Brighter Summer Day, but I would say that he's way more experimental editing-wise before Confucian Confusion. I can't remember for Brighter Summer Day, which I'll rewatch tomorrow, but like Terrorizers, Taipei Story, That Day on the Beach, extremely interesting structurally when it comes to the edit. This one, there's nothing really that interesting going on, which is the point. Like, he kind of like was like, I'm just gonna let the story be a story. E is the same. Like, it's just like, here are some scenes, you know, and the editing is in actually how the scenes play out left to right. Although E has a double date sequence, which I completely forgot.
Right.
This one doesn't have anything of that kind of sort. Yeah.
Yeah. Great movie. This is a director that we're covering everything from. I'm so glad, like, my completionist self is very satisfied.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's still a lot to talk about with this film. I would love to rewatch it again sometime, actually. Yeah.
It stuns on a rewatch, Ben. It really, it stuns.
I bet it's really good in 720p.
I think it's in the upper half of my Yang rankings, if not even higher.
It is definitely in probably my top 3. It is probably
I think so
in
too.
my top 3.
Yeah.
So please watch this movie. I always say it too late. I say it too late. It's always at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review, because that helps us keep making the show and helps others discover the show as well. If you have been a longtime listener and you've not left a review on our show, can you please take the time right now to go to Spotify or to Apple Podcasts and to give us a review, or preferably a written one, because that would be lovely. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod, and TikTok at DeepCutPod_film. You can also join us to talk about movies on our Discord server. We also have a Patreon. If you want to support us, we deeply appreciate it. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, our Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. A special shout out to Patreon supporter Leah Lai. Without you, we cannot do this podcast. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.